Nikki Lowe, and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work, and life in a more successful and sustainable way. Welcome to this episode. I'm your host, Nikki Lowe, and today I'm talking about safeguarding your sanity. The whole reason I started Wisdom for Working Mums was that I felt like I really was losing myself in the whole working mum juggle after I had my first child. And we weren't even trying to navigate a pandemic at that time. So I think now more than ever, it's really important for us to reflect on how we safeguard our sanity as working mums. And when I talk about sanity, what I'm really talking about here is our psychological well-being, our mental and emotional health, and that feeling of wellness and contentment and connection. And it was something that I really struggled with after my first child. And I went on a 2-year journey to really understand how I sabotaged my own sanity and what I needed to do to safeguard it. And so in this episode, what I wanted to share with you are the things that I've been doing during COVID-19 to safeguard my sanity and what I've been doing to support my clients to safeguard their sanity. And there's really 6 key steps. But before we dive in, I'd like to do a listener shout out, and I'd like to thank you, Rhiannon, who reviewed the podcast. And she said, as a mum of 2 young children with a full-time career, I've struggled with so much over the years, not least the all-consuming guilt of not being a good enough mum or a good enough role model at work. Being part of the Wisdom for Working Mums community and having access to the podcasts has been so valuable and has changed the way I think and act, which has made me happier, more positive, and much more in the moment. So that is not only amazing to hear, but I really appreciate you sharing your feedback, Rhiannon. It gets lonely in this podcast world, and I have no idea if you're listening and if you're enjoying it. So if you're listening now and you haven't left a review, that would be amazing if you did. You can head over to iTunes and leave a review there, or go to your favourite podcast platform and leave a review there too. So going back to safeguarding your sanity, what I noticed when we first went into lockdown or staying safe at home was some old habits of mine kind of came to the surface. And really on reflection, what happened was I went into survival mode, probably like most people. And if you've heard me talk about the emotional resilience tool that I'm trained in, there's actually a whole resilience cycle that we go through that starts with survival. So when a challenge or a change or a potential threat hits us, the first stage we do go through is this survival stage. And what I found that I did was that I went to some old habits that, and as they say, old habits can die hard. And for me, that's what I would call my superwoman tendencies, which is around me getting really conscientious and wanting to kind of work longer and harder and please people and try to do everything to 100%. And I can become quite rigid around that. And in doing so, I kind of neglect my needs. And I know I'm not alone because so many of the women that I work with who I get the privilege of supporting share similar insights. And so for the first couple of weeks, what I found myself doing was getting up early or working later to try and fit my work around my children. My husband was still, and has done throughout this whole situation, gone to his place of work, but because he got some key workers and needed to go to work. So I was at home with the children and trying to juggle my work around the homeschooling and mothering and running the house. And so my natural tendency of just really digging deep and going, right, if we face a challenge, I'm just going to use my willpower. And I did that for a couple of weeks. But very quickly, my body started to say to me that she wasn't happy. And as you've probably heard me share before on this podcast, after my firstborn, I suffered with adrenal fatigue. So I'm pretty tuned into my body now. That experience taught me to really respect my body. And so I notice fairly quickly when she's not happy and that I'm doing something that's going to damage her long-term sustainability. So I quickly realised that and really had to pull back. And what it made me do was really create a bit of a gap between what I was doing and switch me off my autopilot kind of tendencies. And in that kind of gap between my stimulus and response was realising that actually this is an unprecedented situation that we've been through. There's no rule book because we've never done this before, and you couldn't look to people outside to tell you what to do because nobody had gone through this. So it really forced me to go within and use my own wisdom, which is always the most powerful thing. But I think we're programmed in the Western world really to look outside ourselves for answers, whether it be books, watching stuff on YouTube, speaking to other people, and all of those things can be useful. But what they can do is contribute to us overriding our own natural wisdom. So I think one of my ways of safeguarding my sanity, I was really forced by my body to take a step back, slow down, and to start to listen to my body. And what that led me to do next was really focus on my nervous system. And I think many of us can relate to living off adrenaline. As working mums, we're often racing from work to children to kind of doing things for others. And we tend to be very much in our fight and flight system. And often completely unconsciously, we're unaware that we're running on adrenaline. But as I said before, my adrenal fatigue has taught me to get really tuned into that. And I would say one of my superpowers is I'm really good at charging up my fight and flight system. And the trouble is it can help me achieve a lot, but if it's overdone, it can really become my nemesis. So I could feel that my nervous system was really charged up, not only from trying to dig in deep, use my willpower, but collectively, particularly at the beginning of COVID-19, there was a collective anxiety about the uncertain, the unknown, the fear around what was happening. And so I could really feel that my fight and flight system was being hammered. And knowing that that's not how it's meant to be, and if we stay there for any long period of time, it can be really unhelpful, I really tried to activate my rest and digest system. So as you're probably aware, we have this complementary autonomic nervous system that's meant to be designed to be in balance. So we've got our sympathetic nervous system that gets charged up when we're faced with a challenge or a threat, and it's designed to kind of bring more resources to it, kind of either fight it, run away from it. It's what causes our pupils to dilate, blood to rush to our extremities, to either our legs to run away or our arms to fight it. And that's, part of our evolutionary wiring, and it's designed to be really helpful. And it can be when we're faced with a very short-term kind of situation. But as most of us find ourselves in that more of a long term, it can lead to kind of chronic stress rather than acute stress. And what's meant to happen is our complementary balancing system of our parasympathetic is meant to almost act like a parachute and bring us back into land and gently bring us down, kind of causing this what's called the rest and digest. So our heart rate to slow down and kind of blood to pump more freely around the body, not just to the extremities. And that's really important for our well-being. And what I noticed was I was getting stuck in my rest and digest, and I've seen that a lot with my clients. I was getting stuck in my fight and flight, and I'm seeing that a lot with my clients and just a lot generally to people that you speak to at the moment. And so I had to go back what I know to be true, but that my head often wants to fight, is that actually for my resilience, I had to rest more. So it meant prioritizing sleep, not pushing myself to get everything done and squeeze stuff in around the children and work stupid hours. So I had to kind of prioritize my rest for resilience and also prioritize my sleep for my sanity. I literally talk about sleep being my spiritual practice. It makes me a better human being and I can function better and be a nicer person in the world. So rather than relying on caffeine to kind of keep me going, and I would kind of be, the first few weeks I was using kind of wine at night to relax, and then I wanted sugar and chocolate to fuel me the next day, all of which create a really unhelpful cycle for me, was really paying attention to my nervous system and prioritizing what I needed for my well-being. The next thing that I did was look at my boundaries, because I recognised that I'd gone into my over-functioning mode. And again, a lot of the women that I support with my coaching tend to be over-functioners. So we over-give, we over-nurture, we overwork, we over-deliver. And I really found myself going into that place. So I was shopping for the grandparents. And as I mentioned, my husband was still working. So I was juggling the kids and my work and trying to shop for grandparents, although they were kind of happy to do their own shopping. Shopping for some neighbours. And, I just found that I was overgiving, and that was really compromising my resilience. So I had to go back and go, actually, what are the boundaries that I need to put in place here for me, kind of to get my needs met so I can function well? And it was things like limiting my news consumption, because I found, again, that was triggering my fight and flight system. And I had to limit my social media. So I came off some kind of WhatsApp group because I just couldn't cope with responding to so many messages. And it felt like that was triggering my stress system, because I felt like I wasn't responding to people. And I just had to go, actually, I've got less to give at the moment. So I really need to pull my resources back more inwards. And that also the boundaries of things like my children's bedtime. Those first few weeks of lockdown, I let the kind of bedtime creep to later because we hadn't got to get up so early for school. But my children are natural early risers, and if I don't get them to bed at a reasonable time, I really kind of regret it the next day. And the same for my own bedtime. So I really looked at what boundaries do I need to put in place? Who do I need to communicate those with? So there were conversations that I had with my husband around actually how do we need to kind of manage the load at home differently, because this dynamic had changed. There was also kind of communicating with my clients around when I was going to be available and not. And it's a big area that I've spent supporting my clients on with their own kind of well-being and safeguarding their sanity, is having conversations with their line managers and their bosses and their clients and the people around them to establish boundaries that enable them to really thrive as much as possible. And it's a difficult word to use during COVID, because I think, survival was priority to begin with, but knowing that actually this was going to be a marathon. So what do we need in place to navigate that? The next thing I did was look at what I call my non-guilt agreement. And you may, if you've listened to other episodes, have heard me share this before. So one of the things that I found when I became a mum the first time round is that guilt really consumed me. I found that I was trying to mother like I didn't work and work like I didn't mother, the classic conflict that many working mums share. And that guilt became really toxic for me. And the toxicity of it was when it became dysfunctional. So guilt can absolutely have a healthy and functional purpose, but equally, the flip side of it can become dysfunctional. And there are times the dysfunctional is when it becomes really unhelpful. And I found myself feeling like my guilt was getting triggered in a really unhelpful way. So things like my standards for how much screen time my children would normally have pre this pandemic, feeling like really, really guilty that they were having more screen time. And actually, it was a coping mechanism. And I was being really critical of myself for some of the things that I needed to put in place to cope. And so what I did was I went back to the drawing board and went and looked at my non-guilt agreement. And a non-guilt agreement is really a contract with yourself about what you are and aren't willing to feel guilty about, because there's 1,000,001 things we can feel guilty about as a working mum, and not all of those are helpful. So I really had to contract with myself about actually, here's what you do want to feel guilty about. And that for me was about being as present as possible with my children. So knowing that there was absolutely going to be times when I was going to have to be working, and there might be times when I would have to put them in front of an iPad to do that. But when I wasn't working, that I was really present with them and showing up in the way that I wanted to. And I found that really useful. And part of that is about recognizing that what your values are as a working mum. And often it can feel that our values are in conflict. So we might have values that are related to our family and then values that are related to our work. So really our mothering identity and our professional identity. And it can often feel like those are in conflict. But the truth is those values can coexist. It's often the goals that we have around those values that are in conflict. And I find that when I'm under stress or pressure, I can go quite rigid around my goals. So I become black and white. It's either got to be done. It's an all or nothing. And that can be really unhelpful thinking. So what I was trying to do was not get tunnel visioned around my goals and loosen them up a bit and say, actually, what might be another way of me achieving these values, given that we're in unusual times? So I might need kind of to reevaluate and reimagine how I do those values and change my goals slightly. So that meant not holding so rigidly onto the schoolwork that school set, because I tried to do that to begin with and it just wasn't working for us. So thinking about, actually, if the value is about helping my son to learn, there's a million and one ways that I can do that, and it doesn't have to be the rigidity of doing it one particular way. And then finally, it was coming back to the principle of doing less. And this isn't something that comes naturally to me. As I said, I naturally can, when I'm under stress, go into over-functioning. So I want to do more. But I've learnt, and my body's taught me this, that I have to put her first. So that means that I have to do less. And what's interesting is that whenever I do less, actually my results improve. And my head still wants to fight that. So what I did a couple of weeks into lockdown, I went, actually, I can't do everything that I want to be able to do. So let me choose what's going to bring me most impact. And if you've heard of the Pareto principle, it's really using that. And the Pareto principle is that 80% of our results come from 20% of the things. So if we can just focus on 20%, we're actually getting the best bang for our buck, so to speak. And it's about managing our energy, not our time. And so I went back to those principles. And so I really had to look at my schedule, look at all the things that my head wanted me to deliver, and be really clear on what's actually priority and what's going to deliver me the most impact. And when I took stuff off my plate, my head wants to fight it. It doesn't like it. But the benefit always surprises me. So actually in lockdown, I've had my best revenue months ever. And when I say that, it just doesn't make sense because I've been doing less. But it's just the power of stepping off that busyness and productivity hamster wheel and reimagining how we want to do this. And that's what I've been doing with my clients, because actually when we do less, we're more creative. We're counterintuitively, we're more productive because we bring more of ourselves to fewer things. We give more. So although my head wants to fight it, and I'm always surprised by the results of it, I know that to be true. And that comes back to that kind of wisdom rather than looking externally and hustling and the messages that we can get culturally, is going back to our inner wisdom about actually what feels right and what is going to be right for us. And that's going to be different for every single one of us. That's what I found with my clients, is helping them to do the reflections around this is really powerful. So hopefully those reflections on the 6 things. So just to reiterate, the 6 things were noticing what sabotages your sanity, tapping into your wisdom and listening to your body and listening to what you need. The 3rd thing is about calming your nervous system. The 4th thing was around setting boundaries. The 5th thing was around creating this non-guilt agreement and having flexibility around your goals. And the 6th thing was around doing less, identifying the 20% of the things that bring you 80% of the results. So hopefully that's been useful insight. And I'm really interested in what listening to this has made you reflect on. What are the things that have safeguarded your sanity during this time? And what do you notice might sabotage your sanity? And thinking about as things go back to supposed normal, which I don't think they will, and I don't think we perhaps want them to, because it's not about going back. It's about going forward. And if we think about going forward to better, actually, what wisdom can you take from this experience that allows you to move forward to better? I'd love to hear from you. So drop me a note by email to nikki@wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk. Head over to the Wisdom for Working Mums Facebook page and drop me a note there. Or head over to Instagram, Nikki_wisdomforworkingmums, and I'd love to hear from you. And if you're a working mum listening to this who's worried about how you're going to cope over the school summer holidays without burning out or losing your bleep, I've created something to support you. And it's a mini online course for working mums called Staying Sane this summer. And it's really designed if you're feeling a bit stressed and overwhelmed and stuck on how you're going to navigate the school holidays. And it's designed to help you feel calm and in control and really get the confidence and certainty to navigate these holidays with more ease. And it really came about because I was hearing from women about how exhausted they already were from the juggle over the past few months, and that they were kind of feeling a bit overwhelmed about how they were going to approach it. And I wanted to help them reimagine how they could do it with more ease and to stop comparing themselves to other mums and that feeling of feeling like you're falling short all the time, and really to help them ditch the guilt, that we talked about earlier about trying to work like you don't mother and mother like you don't work. And really it was about how to help you create happy school holiday memories whilst also managing your work and without burning out. So if you're interested in learning more about this 5-day mini course, and I've designed it to be really, really bite-sized, each day you get a 10-minute video that contains some really powerful insights and tools to help you navigate the school summer holidays. And you'll get loads of cheat sheets to support you. And I'm also going to be showing up daily, each evening, in an exclusive Facebook group to do Q&A sessions around the content and to deliver some laser coaching. And I've put this all together. It's jam-packed with value, and it's just £49, and it starts at the beginning of the school holidays. So basically, the doors close for this course on Saturday the 18th of July, and we'll be kicking off on Sunday the 19th of July. So if you're listening to this podcast when it launches and you're interested, head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk/36, the number 3 and the number 6, and you'll find a link to find out more about the mini online course called Stay Sane this summer. If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too. So if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.